Okay, good evening, everyone. I want to call the December 10th meeting of the Douglas Board of Selectmen to order tonight. It is now 7:01-ish. If we could all stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just remind everyone, this is being broadcast live on our Douglas Cable YouTube channel. Give them a like and a follow, and in way of announcements, I have none. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to something that's currently not on the agenda? Seeing as there is none, we'll move right on, Matt, to talk about some good energy electricity aggregation.
Mr. Chairman, this doesn't need to be a big deal. I'm going to read the press release from Good Energy and ask that the board declare the review period open with a vote on the record, and that's really all we need to do here. I did send the entire package to the select board. I don't know if you have any questions or concerns about it. I'll put on my cheaters here for a second.
Do you, excuse me, Mr. Administrator, you want us to open up the review period before you read that, or?
No,
Okay. No, that's fine. Just asking.
because people wonder what it is that you're voting on. The town of Douglas is holding a 30-day public review period for its revised aggregation plan for Douglas Community Electricity Aggregation. Douglas CEA is our town's official electricity supply program, active since 2016. The aggregation plan describes how our electricity program is structured and operated. Douglas secured approval for our original aggregation plan from the Department of Public Utilities, DPU, in 2015. In July 2024, the DPU issued new rules for aggregation plans called Guidelines for Municipal Aggregators. The guidelines expand local authority for cities and towns concerning the operation of their programs and increase public transparency about program operations. The revisions to our aggregation plan ensure that our plan aligns with the new guidelines. The revised plan will not impact Douglas CEA's current electricity supply options and prices, which are fixed until November 2025 through our supply contract with Constellation. No action is required by existing participants to continue receiving current pricing. On the program website, masscea.com/Douglas, you can review both the revised plan and the current plan. You can also watch a short video describing the revised plan and read the DPU guidelines. Program website has a comment form to provide written comments, or you may email support_MA@goodenergy.com with the subject line, Douglas Plan Comments. Good Energy is the consultant that developed and manages our program on a day-to-day basis. That, in a nutshell, is why we're doing this. All of these group plans like this in the utility sphere, you've got to have this conversation, right? So people have 30 days to look over what the changes mean and then comment. And after the close of the 30 days, we've checked the box. We've done the process that they've asked us to. So if you would declare the period open, the Town Administrator's Office will post all these documents around Town Hall and on the website, and people can get at it.
Ready for a motion?
Sure.
Make a motion to open the 30-day public review period for the revised Good Energy Electricity Aggregation Program and documents.
Second.
Motion's been made by Mike, seconded by Ross. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Consider that open. The program's been pretty good for the townspeople, so hopefully that'll good. What's the will of the board in regards to the plethora of annual license renewals that we've got? Looks like a bunch of people did some homework the past couple days. This list is bigger than it was. Thank you to all who have put it together.
Before you guys do anything, Mr. Chairman, may I please just acknowledge Lisa Freeman getting all of this put together from home while she's out, and there's a lot of work here, so very grateful. She's a very dedicated public servant and wanted to make sure that people had their licenses so they can continue to operate. So, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. I share your sentiments, and way to go, Lisa.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a suggestion that we group them all together with the exception of Breezy Acres, and that's only because there's a contingency on the installation and inspection of a fire suppression system.
I
So
would,
just that way, or we could actually group that in since I just mentioned what it was, so.
well, make the motion, and we'll adjust from there.
Make a motion to approve the annual licenses for Douglas Equipment Corporation, the Class 2, the Goodness Store, Common Vic license, K2 Automotive Class 2, the Sokol Hall, liquor license, Common Vic, pool table and yearly entertainment, Whitensville Fish and Game, liquor license, Spiegel Club, liquor license and yearly entertainment, Breezy Acres, Common Vic, and automatic amusement with a contingency on the installation and inspection of the fire suppression system within their hood before opening for the season, Douglas Orchards for yearly entertainment, Dunkin' Donuts, Common Vic, Extreme Nutrition, Common Vic, Picket Fence, liquor license, and Common Vic.
Motion's been made by Mike, seconded by Les. Having it made it this far, these people have all done their homework, and we cherish them as business owners in town. Any other comments? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is unanimous, and on to the next. It is a lot of paper right here. Grants. One thing Matt and I were speaking the other day, town gets an awful lot of grants, and we might not necessarily do a great job in promoting all the success on that front, but we're going to do a little bit of that tonight with some really healthy numbers coming into the town's coffers for various programs and services.
So if we take them in order, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
Item A refers to a term in the development agreement between the Cubes at Gilboa, or CRG, commonly known, and the town for $300,000. And the agreement calls out specific equipment. So CRG's development agreement was in terms of building that great big building and also having us extend our utilities by their property on two sides, and then they connected it together to make a loop. So all of the equipment that they are going to buy for us is equipment that is necessary for the upkeep and maintenance of the water system and the wastewater system. Perhaps the most important piece of equipment here is a trailer, more or less, called a valve exerciser. This thing turns the valves so that they're regularly exercised all around our system. Some of these things are really big and may require 100 turns or more. And as your workforce ages and goes through repetitive motion, this is actually huge for eliminating the possibility of injuries. And it actually, I think, encourages us to maintain our preventive maintenance program around the water system, because now it's just, it takes a lot less time to do the work that you need to do. Then presently, the water department doesn't have a mini excavator to show up to waterline breaks. We don't necessarily need to bring a full-size piece of equipment. It's actually, in many cases, very tight space where these guys are working. And so the mini excavator, along with a trailer to pull it, is what is slated for that $300,000.
We have places to store this equipment?
Is that the $64 million
Well,
question?
it might still,
None of it's that big, okay? So we are going to store it in our existing facilities. If the town votes for a highway barn, these are candidates that are going to be in the storage part of that facility.
that's where I was
That's in the
going with
spring.
that. I was queuing that up.
It's going to relax.
There is no way any of this can be left outside,
Yeah.
so we're going to put it under a roof.
Item B, $2,900 for self-contained breathing apparatus face pieces.
Are you going to vote them all in as a group, or?
Well, it's, yeah, we
If it's
can.
fine, if you want.
Yeah.
The Douglas Fire Department regularly seeks EMPG grants. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for, I'm going to forget. This year, we got $2,900 for self-contained breathing apparatus face pieces. These are fitted to our members to the extent possible. And it's just another critical piece of equipment that we don't have to buy with taxpayer funds. C and D, the Adult Social Center received 2 grants. One was call it a competitive grant. It was all very small stuff. It's $250 to support fitness classes at the Adult Social Center. The second one is our formula grant, which is about the same amount every year, just goes up and down a couple $100. This year, it's $14,685. I believe that Patrice has some of it slated for fitness classes, but she also uses it for various operational expenses of the center, including some of the per diem workers and office supplies. E and F, at least in the early version of the agenda, didn't have an explanation because they're both marked for community development. It can get easy, can be very easy to get lost on just how many energy efficiency grants we're getting and how we're funding them. These two, we have 2 grants here from National Grid. So what I'm asking you to vote to accept is the incentive grant from National Grid, and that is the only match that will be provided on those projects. So it's town meeting funds that were voted, and National Grid for LED fixtures and light bulbs at a couple of school buildings. No, this is the post office and town hall. And it's the school buildings that are green communities. These are not green communities grants, but we went forward with the projects because of the generosity of the National Grid incentive, and I believe there's an expiration date, so that we wanted to beat that and get our fair share of the funds. So those are the last 2 items. I believe the letters from Innovis joined your packet a little bit late. And of course, I'm going to be searching for it. I just want to read the numbers into the record. So one is for $32,230, and the other is $8,270. Because I'm wicked good at math. That's 40. This one's 3, that's 43. Call it 15, 58.
44.5.
58 and 300, so about $358,000 worth of grants in this one meeting of the Select Board. And just for point of reference, the levy in town growing at 2.5% a year grows about $400,000. So there's been some feedback in the master plan process. People wonder where are the grants? This is what we do. We don't always make it rain like this. There are going to be months where we don't have this kind of throughput. But we seek every opportunity we can to apply for and win competitive grants, as well as making sure we get our fair share of formula grants. So we'll start keeping a running total. I think that's what people really do need to see. Because it's not just the big economic development grants and the big water projects and ARPA and all of that. There's an awful lot of work that goes into just sometimes producing small amounts of money.
That all add up. That's
They
kind
do all that up.
of a compelling piece. In one rainy Tuesday, 300,000, free money. All right, so I would entertain a motion to accept these grants and/or donations.
I'll make a motion to accept the grants as outlined by the town administrator.
Second.
Made by Mike, seconded by Ross. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. crazy to oppose those. And those that have been paying attention to selectmen meetings, they'll know that we do sometimes go into executive session to talk about this thing called MSHG. For the first time in a public setting, we are discussing at least some of this. And with that, Matt, I'll let you cue it up for us.
So I'm going to invite our broker of record from Alliant, Chris Nunley, up to the table to his cherished role as a resource in the conversation. But before I go too far, I'm going to say that the views expressed in these slides that I'm going to show you in the presentation I'm going to give you are my own. They represent my best effort to provide the Select Board with a recommendation that is supported by facts, not by emotion, not by ego or any other foolishness. It really is a very important part of our duty as an employer under Massachusetts state law is to provide employer benefits in the form of health insurance under the provisions of Chapter 32B of the general laws. And I know I'm confident, I'm not always confident speaking for Gene, but I will say that Gene and I and the rest of the team, Holly, agree
You got the eyeball.
that this is a fiduciary duty that we consider to be a sacred trust, that we owe it to the taxpayers of the town to get the best value that we can when we construct a plan. And it is also a sacred trust with our fellow employees to make sure that this one benefit, because we don't really provide a whole lot of benefits, the pension is mandated, but that the health benefit be something that is affordable because they pay for 20% of the cost and acts as an incentive for people to seek the care that they need to prevent conditions from getting worse and to detect conditions before they fully arrive in their severity. And that when you do get the need for care, that you have access to the care that you need and that there are people who are trained professionals who will answer the phone and help you navigate the problems that you have, whether you're an active employee or retiree. And it was some 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago now, that I started talking to the then town administrator in Webster, Doug, about an idea I had from a physician in Rhode Island that I had a long-term association with, not really with him, but with people in the insurance industry that were working with him, and he had some innovative ideas about how to approach health insurance, and he was curious to see if Douglas would participate. I was going to go alone, so we got together with Webster, and then Webster, through Chris, who at the time was working for Group Benefit Strategies in Worcester, who had another client, Dudley Charlton Regional School District. And those two were already self-insured. We were fully insured. And the idea of putting together a more innovative self-insured group and starting to do some of the cool stuff that the industry made possible made sense. And we sat down together and we formed the group and we wrote a participation agreement that was good enough for the three of us. And we enshrined really important values into that document, and for 3 years operated under those values. It wasn't going to be one for all and all for one. That was never, ever anything that any of us wanted to do. It's important for me to emphasize this point, that we did not want to be a traditional joint purchase group that you see all over Massachusetts, whether it's the Mayflower Group or the Minuteman or SMHG down where I live. That wasn't what we wanted to do, where we just created one plan and all the cities and towns and school districts would just buy that one plan or plan with tiers, but it was all one plan designed with one basically administrative service contract. We did not want to do that, especially as a small town, because small towns get lost in the mix in those groups and begin to subsidize the bigger communities. because that's just how the world works. When we were a small town and we were paying National Grid for our streetlights, we got all the fixed cost loading on a per light basis that the bigger communities got. And it was just an exorbitant amount of money to pay for street lighting. So we had, today, sitting here, we pay about 28% of what we used to pay on an annual basis for streetlights. The group was formed, therefore, on an individual basis. We were not going to pool our risk for active employees in one big pool. We would self-insure our own, but we would come together for stop loss, which is the insurance policy you buy for really big claims, as well as other services, including the administrative support from, at the time, Group Benefit Strategies. And I'm going to pass this around while I'm talking. You're going to turn, if you will, this whole thing is for you. This is my annual financial conditions statement that I give you guys at the beginning of the budget season. I might as well give it to you now. But I'm going to start off on page 16. And yes, I did put page numbers. It's wicked cool. I figured out how to do it. It helps people figure out where they are. Gene wants a copy. Somebody make, yeah, there we go. The value proposition for all of this was that we would no longer pay a lot of money for an insurance program and not have any transparency. When we started off, we had absolutely no idea what our medical loss ratio was. We saw our broker once or twice a year. They'd show up in a fancy suit with really glossy things to hand out, and they would turn to the last page and say, well, you're going to get a double-digit increase this year because you deserve it. Your claims are terrible. And you'd say, can we see our claims? No. So you just had to take their word for it, right? It's what some people in my position are happy to have, a bill. Just send me a bill, and I will go to town meeting and get the authority to pay that bill, and they write a check, and they don't even think about it anymore. It's not their problem. As long as their employees get their card and get their coverage, they're all set with it. We envisioned a much more proactive group that had insight into all of our data so that we could begin to craft programs that would address the needs of our employees. And so over time, Chris added, a program that tailored to chronic diabetes conditions. We entered into a contract for a second opinion service because we know that the medical industry itself admits that up to 29% of all first diagnoses can be incorrect. If that's a major condition, it is a huge deal for the individual suffering that condition. It's also a financial consideration for the employer because you want your employee to get well in an effective and timely manner rather than casting about doing a million tests trying to get the answer right. So there's a whole suite of programs that were put in place, and as you can see on page 16, what this meant for us is we started to get a tremendous amount of stability in our rates. So we had been going up on an average 5, 6, 7% a year before that. I don't have a lot of historical data here. I have always said this and will always say it, that in my opinion, Mike Kuzinski understood this part of the municipal budget very well and took a number of steps that were proactive. And he had the standing with the employees of the town, and the employees of the town were generous enough and dedicated enough to make a number of changes to their coverage over the years. So we went from a fully insured Blue Cross Blue Shield product to a high deductible plan, and then we went to self-insurance because people were prepared to make some sacrifices or to absorb change in their lives in exchange for a better benefit that the town could afford. One of the biggest things Mike was able to accomplish is everyone got on the same plan. So before he did that, each bargaining unit and each setup here in town might have had different plans, and they had different options to choose from different carriers. This whole thing got really efficient, and now we are a self-insured entity, which means that we collect the money to pay claims. And that's where I'm going to try to dive into the issues that we have. Self-insurance is largely governed by law, by Massachusetts Chapter 32B, Chapter 152, and the guidance that we get from the state government. This is called an IGR, Informational Guideline Release. This is an old one. It's from September 2005, but it lays out the rules for municipal self-insured plans. And everybody's supposed to follow these rules. They are really not optional, because self-insurance is riskier than fully insured coverage. You're saying that you're going to step up and be a steward and adequately fund your claims trust fund. And there's hell to pay when you don't do a good job of making sure that you have enough funds in your trust fund. And this is where I may need Chris's help, because I'm going to try to explain one of the complexities of self-insurance and the health insurance market is that the world of accounting really blossomed with manufacturing of goods and services and the sales of goods and services, because you could establish an end of year and you knew exactly where you stood at that date. You had so many items in inventory, you had so many items had been sold, you had so many items had been ordered, and for an accountant, it was a lot of work, but the rules were very clear as to where the money was on that day, the snapshot you take the day you close books. Health insurance in particular, all insurance products, but health insurance in particular, because of the number of claims, it's more like a moving train. It's dangerous to jump onto a moving train, it is dangerous to jump off of a moving train, and it takes a lot longer than people realize. Some of these movies are stupid. It takes a really long time to stop a train. So we had a fire in Woonsocket, and I remember it took an hour to stop the freight train that was heading directly to the fire, and between the head of the engine and the border of the fire zone was exactly 1 hour. And the deputy chief was able to call them off and stop the train before it hit the trestle that was on fire. The claims train is the same way. It's a constant flow of information about economic transactions, and there are any number of hundreds of players, some of whom will hold on to a claim all the way to discharge. They're not billing anything. This is especially true of mental health, because mental health practitioners don't want to be told what to do by the insurance company. So they don't tell you that they're treating the patient until they discharge them, and all of a sudden, here comes the claim, it's a big bill. As opposed to more routine procedures, MRIs, blood work, all of the stuff that just gets billed through. There's no real hard and fast deadline for people, right? So when you say that this is the end of the year, you have a whole bunch of claims that you don't know about yet that were incurred during the year that run past that date and still need to be funded because you had your plan active during that period. And this was a major regulatory step by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and most of the United States, was recognition that those claims that had been incurred but not yet reported were actually part of your liability, and your financial structure must account for them in a reserve fund. Every single word I just said is magic. Reserve fund means it's there. You cannot put your reserve fund to work as working capital. You cannot. Period. When we pay a bill in 1 month, we are not paying that month's bills. because this month, we're getting claims from months ago. And we know we have future liability to claims we got this month that we haven't reported yet. This is a very dangerous formula, and a fair number of municipal leaders everywhere across the Commonwealth have screwed this up to a fairly well. You cannot fail to fund your trust fund in a timely manner, because the train is going to keep moving, and you may be 4 months behind paying your bills before you even wink your eyes. So this idea that we take static pictures in our financial statements and that the numbers never move around or never get kludgy is really kind of naive. It doesn't really work that way. But we still do it because a time series will demonstrate the overall financial position of a group. And you can use your existing throughput to estimate what you need to have in reserve and what you need to cover. The challenges of covering your expenses month to month are that, in particular, for MSHG, which is the Massachusetts Strategic Health Group, which has grown from its original 3 members to whatever we are now. 18. Claims that are above the stop-loss attachment point are still paid. We pay those claims, and then we wait for the stop-loss carrier to reimburse us, and it can take a fairly long time for that to happen. We also participate in a carve-out program for drugs. What is really cool about a third-party administrator and a self-insured system is that you are aware of the pharmacy rebates. So in the past, when we were fully insured and our people bought those drugs, those pharmacy rebates went to who? The insurance carrier, not us, which is kind of a kick in the teeth. It's really not a cool thing. But when you're a third-party administrator and you can see all your claims data and you own the claims, then you own the rebates. But what I'm talking about here is the flow of funds. So we will pay for the drug and we will pay for the treatment over the stop-loss attachment point and wait for the rebate to come in on the drug and then wait for the stop-loss carrier to reimburse us.
6-month delay on that.
6 months. So what that means is you need a float. For those of us who grew up in working-class homes, we are very well aware of what a float is. It's the amount of money in your checking account that you hold back and don't necessarily pay a bill right away because you just need to have the money there to prevent your other checks from bouncing and to have whatever emergency cash that you need. What you can never do if you're at home and you're in the store and you got your pay app out, because that's what we do now, we don't carry cash, right? And you see you have money in your checking account. Oh man, I can buy some booze, and then you buy some booze. Then you realize, oh, I haven't paid the electric bill yet. Right? That's a pretty big comeuppance, or there's something happened that you didn't plan. So your car breaks down. So you bought the bottle of booze, but now your car doesn't work. And it's harder to get to work, you have to bum a ride. It's the same thing in a much bigger scale with health insurance. You cannot assume that because you have cash in your account, that you don't have some place where that cash needs to go. And you can't assume that you're not going to have something bad happen to you. I want to give Chris a chance to kind of speak up here for a second before I go back into this. But the marketplace right now is experiencing a number of challenges, and I thought from a broker's point of view, it would make a lot more sense for you to talk to it than me.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the market, a lot of it's what you've already heard, right? So the inflation that's affecting everybody in the market is also now affecting the same exact medical space we expect, right? So just like everyone else, wages have had to go up, so therefore we're now paying more per medical claim. Also, the COVID delay in care was worse than we thought, I think. I think the whole industry would agree on that one. And I think beyond just delay of care, folks didn't get their necessary the necessary checkups, right? So you're seeing colon cancers that are worse than they should be now. You're seeing breast cancers that are worse than they should be because they didn't get caught at the appropriate times during COVID. And then on top of that, the entire market is seeing a high rate of increase, right? So if you look at the Group Insurance Commission, I think they had a 10% increase last year on average on their plans. Maya has come out to most of their groups and said to expect a 10, 10, 10. That's a 10% increase the next 3 years. So everything in the market is telling us that we're going to see some rough years ahead at this point. Every major CEO of the BUCA carriers, that's the Blue Cross, United, Cigna, obviously not the United guy there now, but anyway, all the major CEOs and the major carriers have come out and said to expect increases over the next few years. So I would think I'm confident that you're going to see larger than normal increases across all markets the next few years, just because of all the driving forces to increase costs. So where you see bread cost more, if that's going to eventually trickle into the medical world. If you see wages go up in one field, that's going to trickle into the medical world. And that's what we're dealing with today.
So, Mr. Chairman, my point in asking Chris to give you that briefing, and you can ask any questions you want, obviously, please do, is that what I'm going to get into now on these slides is not an attempt, although I have to hold myself back a little bit, to portray MSHG as some sort of outlier in the world that has fallen astray somehow. That is not the issue. I'm going to make 2 points with the following slides. One, MSHG has not been immune from the changes that have occurred in the marketplace. The issue is not whether or not healthcare costs and other things are growing or changing, or that claims aren't getting astronomical, or that stop-loss insurance somehow got more expensive for us and not anybody else. That is not my point. My point is that MSHG is part of the trend and is adapting to that trend. But my second point is the more salient, which is, as managers, it is incumbent upon all of us to be proactive in addressing changes in the marketplace and changes in the group experience. And that is the accountability piece that I'm driving home with this presentation. So here on page 17, I just want to review our history here in Douglas is that we have consistently run a positive balance at MSHG. We bought in with a month's worth of claims. We had a pretty good year in 2020. 2021 is actually a challenging year where we skated somehow. We actually lost position, but we still stayed positive. Then we had 2 banner years in 22 and 23. 24 was a very difficult year for us. We actually posted an $854,000 loss. Our trust fund balance doesn't reflect the entire loss because the group has now allocated pharmacy rebates to our individual accounts. Before it was being held as a joint holding, and now it got broken out to the entities that generated those claims, got the rebate. So the rebate position here is 180, just about $220,000 of this balance of $1 million was added. So we actually lost more than half of our balance in 1 year. I think that shows a couple of things. As a small group, volatility is really dangerous for us. And a lot of what was driving that wasn't necessarily major claims, it was utilization across our entire group. So we're not going to focus on 1 or 2 sick people. This is our entire group utilized their benefit more. And the costs of the things they bought were higher. Having said that, that's Douglas's experience. I'm going to whip through these financial statements fairly quickly. The group as a whole runs almost like is basically a nonprofit utility, right? You don't necessarily want to kill it and start amassing huge amounts of reserves, yet you want to grow your reserves to the point that you need to be flexible. So you can see the entire group had positive net income in 20, 21, 22, and 23. 23 was actually a pretty solid year. We absolutely got crushed in 2024. So the group lost over $9 million And so far, in the first 4 months of fiscal '25, we've already lost $2 million. I have taken some issue with the presentation of the financial statements at board meetings because I'm not going to mask that $2 million with anything else. So sending somebody a bill doesn't mean you have the cash. You can't take away from that loss until the cash comes in the door. So maybe some's come in since the report was presented, but as of the date that it was presented, the group was $2 million in the red. So that's net income. Net income is your profit and loss statement for the year. As a guy who spent a lot of his career doing receiverships and turnarounds in business, I'm not worried about a year of loss or 2 years of loss in a business. Because you can usually identify the drivers and address them, and you still have a solid book of business, you still have your customers, you still have your vendor relationships, and you can work your way through it. The bigger issue is on the next page, page 19. This is the equity position. So this is all of the accumulated surplus from all of the different members of the group. And the groups in deficit count as a negative. So for 4 years, and especially in '23, the total equity on the balance sheet grew at a fairly robust rate, and by 2023, the equity position was over $8 million. So that's just equity, that's not the assets under management. That's the surplus, and it's held on the liability side of the balance sheet because the group scores equity as something they owe to the members that provided it. So it's a liability, not an asset. The final equity position at the close of fiscal '24 is negative. So you went all the way from 8 million plus down to negative, I believe that's $607,000 in 1 year. So there was a tidal wave of claims activity at a time when the rates, there's an open question of whether the rates were set properly to allow for the funds to be amassed to pay for all those claims. Now, as a receivership / turnaround kind of guy, this is very troubling, right? So this is a very rapid burn through the entire equity of the group that had been amassed over the previous 4 years. It only took them really 6 months for this to disappear.
And remember, in 2023, there was less groups building the equity. There's more groups, so
More groups,
the
more
graph should
throughput.
just go up if that should make sense, not go down.
Right. So the total assets of the group, what are considered assets? It's the cash you have on hand, which would include, going back to my prior conversation, your reserve fund for IBNR, because that's billed through your monthly working rate. It should be sitting there as cash. Cash is an asset. Then you have receivables, so bills outstanding, and you would collect on those in due time. So from '23 to '24, we shrank from 14 million to just about 11 million. So the total assets, as the group was growing and its throughput was increasing, its actual asset, total assets under management, fell. Now, I don't know, did anybody ever take financial statement analysis or accounting in any class anywhere? So you remember the asset test? So the asset test was always, we took current assets and we divided by current liabilities. It's a ratio. And it says how many times you could use your liquid assets to pay your most pressing bills. So I was looking at these figures and I said, I'm going to show a ratio that's similar but not exactly an asset test. But for an insurance company, what am I looking for? Do I have enough liquid assets to pay the IBNR? and I should be able to pay it over and over because I have other expenses I have to pay. As the group's financial position improved from its first 3 or 4 years in operation, the ratio of your current assets, so that's cash and receivables, was almost 4 to 1 over IBNR. We didn't really lose a lot of sleep over IBNR because you just had so much money under management in your assets. Here in fiscal '24, that's down to 1. We have just enough sitting in the balance, on the balance sheet, to cover IBNR once. We only have enough cash to cover our IBNR 33% of the time. So we actually have enough cash right now to pay IBNR 33 cents on the dollar. That's very worrisome for long-term health of a group. So I started to ask, because I don't understand some of the actions that the actions we don't take in order to address these problems. And I went back to the August report, and this completely ridiculous, inane statistic appears in that report called modified cash basis fund balance. There is no reason on God's green earth to show that number to a room full of people. Because what they're doing here is saying, we're going to take your cash balance and we're going to subtract IBNR from the conversation and just talk about cash. Why? Because it's what we want to talk about. This big black blob here over on the right, that's the cash for lack of a better word, that should be tied up for IBNR. But the reality is IBNR is supposed to be a separate reserve. You should never show this statistic. So you turn the page, and when you put the IBNR back in the figures, the group as a whole, its cash fund balance as of June 30th was negative. And the 3 groups that were running the biggest surpluses, if the color coding is a little bit difficult, but I know who they are Medway, Northbridge, and Douglas. All the other groups have a cash fund balance that is negative. So in a conversation that I've had with different folks in the accounting world, including the treasurer of MSHG, it is my opinion, and I feel that these figures help me defend my opinion, that the current management of the group, which has held itself out to be quote-unquote sophisticated, is not at all sophisticated. They are managing to use IBNR as the cash float, which is frankly horrifically unwise, because it's not real money for you to use as working capital, because if anybody leaves the group or the group dissolves, those are real bills, those are real claims that need to be paid, and you need to have a reserve fund in place to pay them. And your failure to adequately to do this in an appropriate manner is dereliction of duty and violates fiduciary duties that we have to the people that we work for. This slide, page 24, I've summarized or grabbed some of the relevant provisions from the law, because sometimes I look in the mirror and I wonder if I'm in, one person used the words twilight zone. I make sure it's me looking back at me, and sometimes I say something to see if I can hear myself. Because to me, these laws form the boundaries of acceptable activity. So the first bullet point is from Chapter 152, Section 25Q2. Each group shall establish and maintain actuarially appropriate loss reserves, which shall include reserves for known claims and expenses associated therewith, and claims incurred but not reported, and expenses associated therewith. So this is not an option. It's not okay to be doing what this group is doing. It's not that it's their fault that the market bit them on the backside. It is incumbent upon the group and its board of directors to put measures in place to address the situation. And that's what my next page goes into. First and foremost, there needs to be a rate adjustment for those groups that are running a deficit. And if that means Douglas needed one, then maybe we need one. But nobody's asked me to, and therefore, why would I? Right? I already have a surplus that I can't get out because we asked them for the surplus and they declined to give us a rate holiday or any other assurances that the town of Douglas's surplus was available for its use. The treasurer the other day responded to my question with the following answer. To the extent that the way the Treasury works right now with MSHG is HPI provides claims on a rolling basis, and the treasurer reviews the balances in our accounts and pays those claims as they come in. So the claims are not sequestered to the group that generated them. So to the extent that Douglas has a surplus, our surplus has been used to pay the claims of another town or school district that is in deficit. I may be the weirdest church lady kind of person on the planet, but to me, that is a conversion. It is completely wrong to take the money that the taxpayers in the town of Douglas and the employees of the town of Douglas provided to this group to pay their claims for the employees of the town of Douglas and the other beneficiaries and their families, to be used for someone else, and then have that someone else say they're not going to fund their deficit. That's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. So I've made a number of suggestions. The joint purchase agreement contemplates that there would be groups in deficit and that we would have to rescue them and we would have to help them. But there was a process, and the process included having a workout plan that lasts for a couple of years. What do? You take your workout plan and you go to a financial institution and you say, for the next 8 months, I need $10 million worth of liquidity, and here's my plan. This is how we will pay your money back. And the entities sitting around this table are municipalities, which are generally favored greatly by the financial world because we don't go away and we have the power to tax. So our risk profile is nil, right? But these guys somehow can't see the way. Note, the finance committee of this group has never met to consider a petition by a member for assistance. I've also said to the group in a letter, which is a public record because I sent it, that to the extent that anyone has made an error that has generated the bad rating experience, they must be held accountable if they did not follow professional standards in calculating those rates. Predicting health insurance claims is like predicting the weather in the summer in Rhode Island. You don't know it. You can be sitting on the water and a squall blows up. That's not the problem. You will never get it right 100% of the time if you're an actuary and you're doing health insurance underwriting. You're just never going to get it right all the time. You're going to make mistakes, or there's things that are going to happen that you never considered. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not all of the data that a responsible actuary should have considered when constructing the rates was taken into consideration, including past year deficits, and a really well-scrubbed set of expectations about what's going to happen in the future, including deleting or not taking into consideration one-time major revenue events like a Medicare migration. You got to take that out because there's losses under there that are being masked by revenue events. And you got to focus on the losses and project the losses. It is my professional view that an errors and omissions claim may be warranted with A.J. Gallagher, the firm that was providing that service to us. So what does all this lead up to? Before I get to my recommendation, I'm going to turn back to Chris, because the second purpose that I asked him to be here tonight was to talk about, before we get crazy here, are we going to jump off a boat that may be listing to one side into an ocean full of sharks? Because that's not an improvement. So I wanted Chris to kind of talk about what options we will have if we take any kind of action based on this information.
Yeah, of course. So the data that Douglas has available to him is pretty second to none. You've been in a self-insured environment now for several years. You've been with a TPA. So the access to your data to go out to bid is pretty strong, right? It's probably the best you're going to get in this kind of market. So the option, what's next is the following, right? So we go to the fully insured marketplace. Of course, we'll look at that. We have to look at that. But then we'll also look at other purchasing coalitions, whether that's just through stop loss or whether that's actually with other groups and communities of like-minded like Douglas. That's an option as well. But the reality is, no matter what option we decide to go forward with, you're going to be partnered up with other group, whether it's just with stop loss, right, for high cost claims, or whether it's for admin and stop loss, or whether it's a similar setup as MSHG. So there's other towns and communities in this area that are looking for options outside of MSHG as well. We'll certainly be talking with them. We've also already talked to Health Plans, which is your current provider of medical benefits. They've already forwarded the fact that they will keep the same admin costs as MSHG is currently being charged. So the inner workings for your employees, should you take that model, will be exactly the same. There will be literally no difference. Their card will not change, their medical benefit will not change, their prescription drug benefit will not change. So ideally, that's where we want to end up, right? But the thought process, again, no matter what you do, you're going to be coalition purchasing, whether that's stop loss and admin fee or just stop loss, whatever the case might be. But Douglas is in a position where you're large enough where you should be self-insured, but you should still not be completely out in the ocean by yourself. You should be with other folks, if that makes any sense. So did I answer your question fully? Does that make sense, everybody, before I? Awesome.
So where we are now as a group is we are currently out to bid for two major relationships. We're out to bid for a third-party administrator, so HPI is the incumbent. I don't know what we're going to get. I think that just started, and we have...
Excuse me, Matt, you said as a group, we're talking MSHG?
MSHG is out looking, so this is a periodic contractual renewal. I think we're doing it every 2 or 3 years. Third-party administrator is the nuts and bolts stuff, right? It's making the trains run on time, reporting good, accurate data, working with basically our consultants to ascertain what needs to be billed out, what needs to go to stop loss, and pursuing those opportunities. We are also out to bid for the consultant relationship that Gallagher has now had for 5 years with us. And I'll make no bones about it. This was a contract that Chris put in place, but it was a Gallagher contract. It wasn't a Chris Nunnally contract. It was Arthur J. Gallagher's form of contract. It wasn't really the greatest contract for a Massachusetts entity. It sort of had automatic renewal clauses and a bunch of things that we're not allowed to put into contracts in the state. We voted, well, to be blunt, I made a motion to terminate that contract immediately back last November, because it was my view that once Chris and Anthony left Gallagher, that we would not have capable representatives in that firm to help us navigate the year. We had a very challenging year coming up. We already knew that stop loss was going to be a challenge. We knew that our pharmacy benefit contract was up for renewal. So I personally wanted experienced professionals that knew our group well to be leading us through those processes, and I think I only got 3 or 4 votes. There was one town manager who didn't want me to use the word terminate in a sentence.
You got one less than half.
We did vote, that may have been closer than I thought.
It was one less than half.
Like 8 to 6 or 8 to 5. But in any case, then we went to, well, we are going to go out to bid, but we'll go out to bid at the end of the year. So the problem is, if, in my opinion, we did not really get very good service from Gallagher during those 6 to 8 months, it sure as heck has shown up in the financials. And so now we're in the bid process. We have 5 finalists. Alliant is one of them. Gallagher is one of them, 3 other firms. And that process will work out however it's going to work out. It is a Chapter 30B RFP, so there's a score sheet, and we're scoring a whole bunch of factors, and then we will open the price bid at the end. That, to me, is going to set the stage for what MSHG's possibilities are for getting closer to being capable of navigating the problems that we have. So if we end up with the wrong third-party administrator and a consultant that doesn't have a lot of experience in this field, working with a group structured the way ours is structured, we're actually going to be educating people who actually we count on to help us. So that scenario frightens me enough to drive to this conclusion, which is I think we need to start the process of leaving MSHG. There's basically 3 pieces of correspondence. One is we send them a letter before January 1st that says, show us the door, we're out. But that is not final. You have, as a select board, the entire month of January to assess what is going on. But before February 1st, if you wanted to leave, you would have a vote on the record in public session, and you would send that letter. It says, all right, 2 votes, 2 times, we're out. Then the responsibility is on MSHG. It is in the agreement. They must respond with a written roadmap for the process for leaving that they will follow. Wrinkles, 2 wrinkles, as far as I'm concerned, that I need to apprise you of before you make any decisions. Because it was your signatures that got us into this agreement. And only you can get us out. I cannot. One is, they were both in my mind, and now they both left me.
Well, you're
My
thinking-
stuff.
2 wrinkles.
I will
to the-
say, years ago, I think you did make the right decision upon joining that group.
Yeah.
I just think there's been some challenges over the last 6 months. I created MSHE, so it hurts me to have these
It's
conversations.
like a broken toy. It's terrible. It's happened to it.
What's your last name?
Nunnally.
All right. I entertained myself, and I spent about 45 minutes reading minutes of the MSG before tonight's meeting. Back in April 28, 2022, you said there would be no negative impact for a community to join the group. And it's my understanding that they have a pretty big deficit at this point. My question is who controls whether or not that deficit's getting addressed and the assessments? Because I've seen 5.2 percent that town was going up, suggested that it goes up, and
Yeah, that's-
we're at a 0, which makes sense if we got a $1.6 million surplus, so why would we go up? I get all that. Is it the group itself that votes and says, Les doesn't have to pay, Matt doesn't have to pay, you can pay a little bit, he doesn't have to pay? Is that how it's working?
As the broker consultant, we have no say over anything. Our job is purely to report and give the board the option to vote. So the board has.
I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
where it fell apart, right?
But I can answer your question.
You have to understand, like, I left the company and
For my fellow board members, if you go and just look and put in MSHG, and it comes right up, and actually you can go to the town of Webster's website, they got a little poster on there that you can sign up real quick for. But all their minutes are available. So I started reading through it, and I could almost watch a pattern, because first I was jumping. I seen April 28th, so then I went to the following year, April, and went because I wanted to see where it started falling apart and then bounced around a little bit. And it wasn't until you had a change in the bookkeeper as of late that this stuff came to light. And before that, everything was all rosy and it was perfect, right? Reading through the minutes, that's what I was getting out of it.
Yeah, I would say as early as November or December of last year, there were signs of cracking, I would say, and I think in your largest communities, by January, February, it was clear that the cracks were
But
there.
out of 18 communities, how many have surplus?
Right now,
Yes.
3. 4, there's three big ones.
So
and
this
two
is a
small.
real easy decision as far as I'm concerned to leave, because you're never going to get the majority to say, Les, you got to pay, Matt, you got to pay. It's just not going to happen if everybody owes money. It's a losing battle. It's just business.
Yeah, the reality is that the rates were set too low 2 years in a row, and then a whole bunch of mitigating circumstances beyond that.
So, but I want to speak to the process because it's one of, sometimes when I'm talking to myself in the mirror, trying to see if I'm insane or not, I feel guilty and then not guilty. Because every single one of us sitting around that boardroom is an intelligent enough and mature enough individual to take a stand and say, I don't want it to work this way. I don't think you should get to choose your rates because that's what's convenient for you. When you sign this agreement, you're saying that the board will set your rates and will set your rates so that you're following the financial path that the agreement contemplates, that you'll be fully funded plus 8 to 12% as a cushion with your IBNR built in. And I think culturally, we were doing so well as a group that the presentation was very easy, right? Well, what do you want to take this year? Like, you could take a 0, you could take a 3, you're running a surplus, what do you want to do? And it was kind of nice as a municipal manager to say, well, I know I got to stay ahead of the future, but this year I want to make sure my budget is balanced without too big of an increase in health insurance. So I think one year we took a 7, because Douglas took a 7 because Gene and I agreed that that was a responsible thing to do.
Year one.
But I think the broker's recommendation, and it was your recommendation at the time, may have been a 5. Right?
That's
We went over it because we wanted to be prudent. I think this time around, we had this conversation and there was, so this is 2024, setting the rates for 2025, a couple of problems. One was, we were dealing with a new actuary for the first time. Now, I don't know about you guys, I find people, when John Hancock was my client as a business strategy consultant, the CEO sat on the top floor. You know who was on the next floor below him? The actuaries. Because, and it was the quietest place in the world. It was like a mortuary. Because they were crunching numbers all day. They were making the decisions that would make the company profitable or not profitable. At the time, Hancock was issuing an IPO to become a publicly traded company. Actuaries are highly trained, mathematical minds, and they work the numbers. I don't actually think it's that sophisticated. I haven't seen anybody pull out anything that looks like calculus. I'm sure there might be some in there, but it's more about experience dealing with risk tables and the distribution of risk and making sure that you're making assumptions about future losses that are supported by some kind of statistical inference. So we have this new guy, very articulate, goes through his rate-setting process. You sit there, you listen to it. Who am I to challenge an actuary and say, actually, no, I think, and I did actually say it, I think Franklin should get a 17, and you've got him here for a 7. I don't think it's going to work. I can think that all I want to, but am I going to subject myself to a vote? It would have been 14-1 every single time I opened my trap, because what's the point? And it was also this very interesting group dynamic where I'm not going to hold you up because in retribution you might hold me up. And there was a little bit of that game theory, free rider kind of stuff working its way through the group. I think the knives came out, though, when we started to inquire of the actuary after the fact, when we started to get really bad numbers in '24. Hey, or at the beginning of '25, actually, did you take into consideration the past deficits? Because Chapter 32B says, it's in my little cheat sheet here, you must liquidate your deficit in the following fiscal year. That's the law. It's not really optional. So to the extent that he underwrote groups in Massachusetts that had a deficit from the prior year and didn't set rates to cover those deficit plus all projected losses, that's a problem. But you can see where we ended up, right? The dynamic in the room, the social, intellectual, whatever you want to call it, we weren't going to engage the actuary and push back on his math. It was only after the fact when it was like, wait a minute, there seems to be something missing because everybody's running red. And it shouldn't be everybody. So when the actuary misses, it might be a couple of groups, but out of 17 or 18, you should have a fair number of them that are running okay. And when we close the books in 2024, every single member of the group, except for one, had a deficit. That means we missed it, big time, completely. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it has been more of a negotiation than it has been a rate setting. And some of that, I'm going to be very blunt, probably get myself in trouble for this, is because that consultancy and another consultancy ran the room. It wasn't the board running the room. The board wasn't paying any bleeping attention to the financials and didn't feel that they needed to set those rates higher. They were going to, as long as the expert says we could do it, we're going to go with that. There wasn't energy in the room to fix the problem, and there was an excuse provided. And for a number of reasons, which have nothing to do with health insurance, everything to do with politics, there was a goal to keep rates low for some of these groups.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for your meeting to come in.
Way easier.
2%.
And that's where I'm at with it. So this has been, I spent my whole graduate school doing game theory and microeconomics and why do groups make decisions and how do small groups work. And this has been fascinating in a macabre kind of way to watch people just sit there and watch a financial entity kind of crumble around its basis and then try to pick it apart to try to fix it, when that's not the solution. The solution is it needs more money. It needs to be funded.
There's only one way they're going to fix it, every single town that's in deficit has to fix their problem. If they don't do that, you're not going to fix it, because you're over 80% in deficit
Yeah.
of the towns. So I don't think we have a lot of choice. You can wait until February 1st, but I'm pretty much there now after I read the minutes and just listening to the different things. You can't commit, I think it's Franklin that I sent you a picture of the override sign, right? So Douglas is in a unique situation. We're very fortunate. And if we forget history, it'll repeat itself, but we're very fortunate today to be in the financial position that we're in, and through a lot of hard work that everybody's done. A lot of communities are where we were before the override,
Yeah.
and you can't get them to pay now. It's like, I'll take my chances with the tilting ship and the sharks.
Right.
Because I think this thing's going to go down in flames.
So I remembered one of the two things I needed to put on your radar screen. One is, you look through my presentation, we are experiencing a technical difficulty. The group is in breach of Massachusetts general laws because it has not been audited since 2021. And Massachusetts law says that a group of this nature must be audited every single year. So it may behoove us, and it's a shame, but the joint purchase group does give us the authority to request an audit and to hire our own auditor at some expense. But how much do you want to spend to get your $1 million back? If you need to spend 60, 70 grand to get your $1 million back, I would recommend you do that. There are people who specialize in this and forensically recreating this, the financials here. And it will be challenging. It's not a light lift. This is a very complex group, lots of members, lots of claims. Some of the data is a moving target, but I have in the past inquired, and you may recall, when we were talking about the school lunch program and we wanted to get a better handle on what was going on with it, that I approached several auditors who who specialize in looking back and trying to fix things. And I've reached out to some of them just to get a price, just to have some idea of what it would cost. But I may be asking you to do that. The second thing, it finally came back to me, and I didn't even have to look, because it's on the agenda. It's a terrible thing to say, but I would strongly prefer, if it is legal, and what I'd be asking you to do is authorize me to research it, and then if Rich Bowen agrees we can do it, that we would approach HBI to accomplish it, which is to create a separate, for the benefit of account with HBI. So we would load the account at HBI, and HBI would pay our claims.
Basically like a temporary self-insured,
Yeah, we're just not giving our money to MSHG.
just an individual. So,
Because right now, sitting here tonight, for fiscal '25, we're in a strong surplus position after 4 months. Very typical for us as a high deductible health plan that our claims come at the end of the year. Right now, though, I'm not at all excited about any further surplus from the town of Douglas being in control of a group that's just going to use it to pay somebody else's claims. I don't want that to happen. So those are the two considerations here. I would need you to authorize me to set that up so that if it is possible, I could just move it as quickly as possible. And then secondly, we don't have to do this tonight. I should do some more research, but get a sense of whether or not you want to audit the books. What I don't want these people to do is tell us they can't possibly figure out what to pay us because they have never audited their books. That will survive 10 seconds in front of a TV camera and should never be said. However, a number of things have been said in this group that should never be said, and they say it anyway.
so I'm in agreement with both scenarios that Matt had said, but I have a question for Chris.
Sure.
What's the survival chances of this group from now on?
That's a loaded question. You know,
Well, it's something you got to think about, right?
yeah, no, the reality.
Going to make it to June, how soon do we need to?
The reality is if groups do not do mid-year rate increases, which we talked to a few of the groups that they are going to be doing mid-year rate increases to help catch up with this. I have a hard time believing it could die before July 1st, but Matt's shown you that the math is not great. Saying that, maybe it's arrogance, maybe it's way too much trust in my own ability. If they do decide to go in a path away from Gallagher or NFP, I feel confident that if you do the right things quickly, you could solve a lot of their problems. The political issues, I don't see those getting solved overnight, but there's some things you could do with insurance tools to right the ship almost immediately that aren't being done right now. So can we keep this thing afloat through June? I think yes. The answer is yes. In short.
So this is Matt Jean's question. These towns that are in deficit, this is, for them, the challenge they have is a town meeting vote in order to get their deficits corrected. They can't just pay it. They can't bring it up, right?
So some towns have the ability to do a mid-year rate increase because there is room within their budget to do it. Other towns, to your point, are going to have a special town meeting if they want to go pursue that.
Or I guess if it's a small enough number.
Well, I think it depends on how big the number is. It depends what their funding sources and
Right.
availability are.
Yeah.
We all have very different financial positions as towns and school districts. I think really the school districts are the most challenged. They've been given a budget. They don't really have the funds available to use for this. I suppose, I don't know the answer. I would investigate whether choice in the regionals would be something they could use. But they don't have free cash. They don't have a stabilization account. So I think they're really stuck where they are. But for the municipalities, if you have free cash, to be blunt, if you have free cash, then you need to have a town meeting.
You don't
and
have free
transfer the
cash.
bloody funds to your health insurance group that's in the red. There's no excuse for it because you have it.
Yeah, well,
If you don't have it, you would have to raise and appropriate, And that's why Chapter 32B is written the way it is. Yes, you can do a mid-year rate increase, but 32B actually says in fairly clear language, if you have a deficit one year, you make it up the following year. And I think it was written that way by the drafter to say there's no excuse. When you get to your next town meeting, this is a bill that you have to pay. And it's almost like snow and ice. You can run a deficit, but you can't run it forever. You've got to fix it. And this is where I get annoyed, because I think this agreement was very well written. Chapter 32B says, unless it is otherwise provided, you must pay your deficit in the following fiscal year. Our agreement provides otherwise. Our agreement says you can have up to 2 years, but you've got to come to the Finance Committee and the board needs to approve the workout. If I was going to give somebody a workout who needed a 12, I would, because I'm on the Finance Committee, do a financial scenario model, and I would give them an 8 and 4. And I would say, that's the basis. So whatever the actuary comes up with for your loss, that's going to be on top of what you owe to pay off the deficit. But you're going to do 2/3 one year, 1/3 the second year, and whatever else you need to do to cover your projected losses. So they might be looking at double-digit increases 2 years in a row. That's one heck of a lot better than doing a 20 1 year.
And the reality is, most of the market's going to see double-digit increases over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Can you make a recommendation?
So my recommendation here is that we start the process, that the letter that I drafted that was part of your packet be sent under my signature, speaking for the town, and that we post this for another vote at your second meeting in the month of January for a final decision. Well, a lot of water will go under the bridge between now and then. We can have an update.
In the meantime, we'll be exploring options.
Yeah. Probably know the answer to this question, but there's any value, no value, great theater for a representative from MSHG to come forward and explain some of these numbers to us. I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking at 7 figures that this town's expecting, and I don't have a ton of confidence that the answer would be good, but in the interest of being communicative, is that a value?
You heard my perspective. I would say that if you listen to any other perspective, it should be the treasurer of the group. While new in the role, it's actually a refreshing thing to have a new set of eyes looking at the financials. And the person we hired for this job is the former town accountant for the town of Wellesley, and was in that role for many years, and is very highly regarded in that field.
20 to be exact.
Yeah.
They were
In my
they were also in
interactions-
my minutes.
I say you have read your minutes, eh?
In my
Her first name's
interactions
Cheryl.
with her, I think she's a very straight shooter. I don't know that it helps to play the politics here and listen to the other political side, because I think you're just going to be frustrated. Because frankly, I've tried to have conversations about legal documents and numbers, and I don't get very far. All I get was, that's your opinion. We can agree to disagree, whatever, Matt, and then we have a vote and I lose, I get one to choose.
Mr. Chairman, my thoughts on the initial letter that he wants to send is basically putting them on notice that we're serious about this problem. You do that, they have 6 weeks to get their act together and come up with a plan on how they were going to address this problem to eliminate the over 80% deficit that they have going on with the 80% of the groups that are in there. And we'll see what their response is then. They're going to come in, they can just tell you whatever they want to tell you, and you have nothing to really back it up. It would benefit the members of our board to sit there, it doesn't take long, because they don't have, their minutes aren't long. There's only 1 or 2 pages, and you can breeze through them pretty quick and get some really good information out of that fast.
And I would say read the early minutes and then read the later minutes. It'll give you an idea of,
I went through all of them.
if you thought, it'll give you an idea of the changes in the mood, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
But you can see it, right? You can see you can watch how it progresses. I was looking at what the structure of the group was, who was at top, and when certain people came in, there was a Tina there for a while, and then there's a whole bunch of different people in there. And I was paying attention to that. And you can, as these players change around, for lack of a better description, you can see how the group was changing.
Correct.
Right? And I got that all in 45 minutes.
Correct.
So I'm sure if I'm going to spend more time on it, guaranteed, I know how I think. But if I get that much information that quick, it's right there for everybody. I even looked to see what they hold them in the Medway Town Hall at 1:30 in the afternoon, right? Why did I look at that? Because it's a public meeting, so why can't I go to it, right? So,
You can't.
just like I did tonight, just be quiet and absorb and see what's being said. It's easier that way.
All right. So Matt, you want this board to take an action today with an understanding that we'll be letting the water go under the bridge, but to tackle this again, second meeting in January.
Send a letter of notice.
So I'm, in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking for two votes.
Okay.
One is to authorize the town administrator to send the first of two letters, but no, that's it, just
The
the
initial
first
letter.
the initial
Yep.
letter,
Notice letter.
providing the group notice of intent to depart before January 1. And the second vote would be to authorize the town administrator, if, with the approval of, or how do I want to say it, in consultation with the town council, to establish a for the benefit of Health Plans Incorporated for the purpose of payment of the town's claims and expenses.
Chris, is that you?
No,
No.
I'm not a TPA.
So that's our third-party administrator. That's our claims, the claims engine.
Yeah, I understand. Go ahead, Les.
So, just a quick question. The auditor's report, is it one, I understand us doing our audit report, but they're also on the hook to do it. Is it, is part of this notice that we're going to send out, that I'm in favor of, send them, that we're leaving, is to request the latest copy of their auditor's report?
So I have that, but like I say, that was 21. So,
For again, for the current fiscal year.
yeah,
Doesn't exist.
Well, correct, but just to be in the letter, please. But there's a purpose behind it,
you're right.
because the lack of them doing the audit reports and their inability to provide them for the last 2 fiscal years, then it's an issue in itself.
It's somewhat shocking to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the table full of town administrators, and we just never did an audit.
So let me do the history of the audits. So I think it was on my watch that we brought in Roselli. You don't do an audit the first year of the group because you don't have mature claims. So you let the group exist for 2 years and then
You grow,
do 2
yeah.
years worth of audits.
Correct.
So that you can show, what you're really going to pay attention to is where you are after 2 years. But you're going to fulfill the audit requirement, annual audit requirement by doing 2. The auditor then began to prepare the 2022 audit and was nearly finished. And requested an engagement letter because the board had never engaged him beyond the first 2 years. So he was our auditor, it was Roselli. He was our auditor. And it was almost like kind of understood that he would continue, but we didn't actually have a contract for the third year. I personally was not okay with the work that Roselli had done, and I frankly found him a difficult person to talk to and to an unnecessary level of obstinacy. So I did not sign the engagement letter with him while I was in the chair. I left the chair in July of 2023. The new chairman wanted that audit to be completed, and so in August 2023, began to pursue with the board the conversation of getting that audit done. It is, I will stand corrected if I'm wrong, but on my motion, I believe we voted either to allow Roselli to be engaged to finish that audit, but then we would go out to bid, or just to go to bid. I was pretty annoyed at that meeting, so I'm not remembering everything that happened.
I was pretty sure it was finish and then engage.
Yeah, all we needed to do was sign the engagement letter and pay, and we would have had 2022. But I really wanted to go out to bid for the audit services in '23, because I had my own concerns about the accuracy of billing. And that was feedback I was getting from Gene and our other finance folks, that there were lots of times when we were doing all of our reconciliations here. So we would get the run from HPI, and Gene and Holly would go through it, and Cheryl, I'm sure, everybody in the finance team, and match up all of the eligible employees with what we had been charged, and whether we were being charged an accurate amount. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if Douglas is paying attention, but maybe these other groups are not. So where's the auditor's stance on the accuracy of this critical function billing? And because he hadn't flagged it in 3 years, I was like, I want to get somebody who's going to pay attention. That's where I was. Since then, we have not discussed auditing this group once.
And you have a new treasurer, right? The group has a new treasurer, and one of the fiscal responsibilities of a new treasurer is to have a audit report taking on what they're seeing and reviewing the past treasurer's audit report, so there is alignment.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I wanted the letter.
So I have some sympathy for her, because it does not appear that we've done a bank reconciliation in a long time. Again, if you're in the receivership world or the financial distress world, this is a huge red flag. I can tell you as a resident of Westport, our town did not reconcile, the treasurer and the town accountant did not reconcile for 5 years. And we were in a world of poop, because nobody knew where the money was. We basically failed to make a pension payment. It was terrible. You can't let those reconciliations slip. And when you have an organization this complex, you've got to stay on top of it. So the poor person, the poor woman has to go through and try to start a reconciliation and auditing process really with 3 years worth of data to mess with. So she needs big time leverage. And the group don't got no money to hire.
All right, knowing that we're also talking about this a little bit in executive session, I'd like to move forward with Matt's recommendations to...
One quick question. HPI, you called them out specifically, this doesn't have to go out to bid?
Does it have to go out to bid? Yes. It is out to bid. So if you're asking me the technical question,
Well, no, you specifically called out about a discussion authorized the town administrator established for the benefit of accountant, third-party administrator,
So,
health plans
their
incorporated,
contract
right? So,
so to answer your question, I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Their contract wouldn't end until we leave,
Okay.
right? So it's
Okay.
July 1.
Okay.
There are third-party administrators through July. And if they renew, they renew. If they're not
yeah,
selected.
just from a procurement thing, that's why I even asked that question.
Oh, to go out to bid to put the account there?
Well, no, we're going to have to enter into an agreement with them, a separate agreement?
Yep.
It's just a legal agreement that they're going to hold our funds. it wouldn't be we wouldn't be charged for the service.
Oh,
Okay, that helps
Yep,
clarify.
yep.
And I think health insurance, the selection of a carrier does not have to follow Chapter 30B. You could do that outside of those.
So you're
procurement.
correct. So brokers and health insurance don't
Correct.
fall under 30B. The problem with third-party administrators, they're providing a series of services that
Different conversation.
Yep.
the inspector general will often opine you should go out to
This is going to get interesting really quick, so I'm just making sure that we don't have any hiccups on our end, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good.
All right. Entertain a motion to authorize the town administrator to establish for the benefit of an account with third-party administrator HPI for the purpose of payment of claims and expenses incurred for the next 7 months.
Are we adding anything about the Rich Bowen in there?
I would just say, after consultation with council.
In coordination with,
Yeah.
in consultation with Attorney Rich Bowen.
Second motion.
Motion's been made by Mike, seconded by Les. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. That is unanimous. And the second request you had?
Just to send the first notice of withdrawal
Yeah.
before January.
And,
That's written, as written.
and Les said he wanted the
Request for the
most
audit.
recent audit report.
So I will not send it, I will make these edits
Yeah.
as requested, send it around. We don't have time for another vote though, so.
No,
That's the only edit that you're putting in.
that's it.
It's only edit I want to put in there?
Yeah.
That's satisfactory, just authorize me to send it
Yeah.
as edited.
As edited, yep. I'll make the motion to, for the town administrator to send the first notice to the MSHG regarding our departure. That's been drafted.
I like it. Seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Is unanimous. And we'll see how this plays out.
Topic
Jim.
in both January meetings.
Nice to see you all again.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
All right. Matt, you have a lot on your plate, and you keep coming back to building a municipal light and power operation, which I love, by the way. I'm all for it. I think,
At the last meeting, I'm looking, I'm aware of the time, I don't want to take away from executive session. At the last meeting, I believe it was the chair, and May, and that's like Davis as well, asked me to identify options, because one of the things that the administration is looking for is guidance from the select board on what you want to do with this thing, and, or whether to do it at all. So the Massachusetts, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council did this nice little pamphlet on what a municipal light and power corporation is, what its powers are. And the people who wrote this were focusing on clean energy initiatives. They don't get to that until like page 6 or 7. They go through in some detail in the initial pages just to introduce the concept, what it is. And I will summarize that for you now and try to identify what the issues are. So Chapter 164 of the Massachusetts General Laws creates the option for municipalities to, and at the time it was, this is an old law, so this was right around the turn of the prior century, so the late 1800s, early 1900s, authorizing municipalities to either build or purchase power plants to provide electricity to citizens. The concept of a mega utility company was not a thing when electricity first arrived. And the idea was it might end up being a publicly owned service. And so in Massachusetts, some 40 communities signed up within the first decade and a half or 2 decades of the law's existence to have their own power. And only one has been added since then. So in 1996, when Fort Devens was closed and became basically a municipal entity, Devens, they already had power plant, right? So they went and they did a municipal rate of power. The statute is fascinatingly simple. And it basically says, within your boundaries, you can purchase any portion of a utility operation that you desire to. So you don't have to own a power plant. You can buy a substation. You can buy, there's a little bit of a misperception that you have to buy the poles and wires. You don't have to. But the idea would be that you escape some of the general regulation that applies to the major utilities, in this case, Eversource and National Grid. So some of the things that they are mandated to do, municipal light and power are not mandated to do. So municipal light and power can go to the wholesale energy market and purchase electricity without any clean energy requirements. That seems somewhat contrary to the modern political view. But I will say that those communities that have municipal light and power purchase power in block. So they're not generating it themselves, they're just reselling it. So Holden is one of those towns. Their energy costs are much lower. They're significantly lower. Municipal light and power has the ability to go out to bond, and it would work as a traditional project finance business-like entity that we would, where ratepayers would pay. And the economic development opportunity that is created by having control over your own energy future is that you could enter into a power service agreement with a major off-taker and charge them sufficient money to pay the bond. And you end up owning the asset and controlling the future of that asset. When this idea first started floating around in my head, it was because of some of the difficulties, 2 things. The difficulties we were having with solar fields. They're just not good players. They build the things, then they run away, and everybody's stuck with basically the waterfall nightmare from hell every time we get a couple of inches of rain. And they are being built in an opportunistic manner only with the land that's available in the private sector. We haven't developed any town property with, and we have some town properties that frankly may not have, a solar field might be the highest and best use of some of the property. And that alone was interesting but not compelling. It became compelling when battery storage became a real thing. Because now if you have an interconnection with the grid, maybe your renewables are generating a certain amount of power to occupy the battery space, but you could also just take power from the grid when it's being sold at a low rate, hold it in your batteries, and sell it back into the grid when the rates are high. And for me, that's an opportunity to play in the energy market as a way to diversify the revenue streams of the town. Because I don't see the town tolerating so much economic and commercial development that you radically change the nature of the community. So we are going to try to get more commercial industrial taxpayers so that instead of being 96% residential and 4% commercial industrial, you may not have to go as far as Sutton, but you still want to be like 10%, 15%, because at that point, some of the shock of some of the things that will happen in the life of the municipal entity can be absorbed by the commercial sector, not always by the homeowner. And so there's that attraction. There's also the notion that if we had our own energy assets, what would we do for public buildings, emergency management, and basically the needs of the community at a time when energy markets are forecasted to be very constricted, if not volatile. So we live in very strange times, right? Because everybody wants to restrict a certain form of energy generation, and yet policy direction is to electrify the universe. The two goals don't make any sense taken together. And for some people it may be politics, to me it's not. It's acknowledgement of reality. The future of the world is hybrid. There isn't going to be 100% electrification, and we already don't live in a world of 100% fossil fuels. And that mix is going to change rapidly. I would think that an awful lot of what can be electrified will be. However, electricity comes from somewhere, and it is not Bullwinkle and Rocky in a barn somewhere rubbing two pieces of wool together and collecting static electricity. You get electricity by burning, for the most part, burning natural gas. And at any given time, you can go to a little app on your phone that you can get from the New England ISO and see what mix of power sources are providing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with all of its electricity at any given time of the day. And you will see that mix is almost always, especially in high demand, peak demand periods, natural gas fired plants. Artificial intelligence and the data center sector of the economy is growing rapidly and is becoming a major part of our economic future. Not just economics, but national security and a whole bunch of other considerations go into the federal government's investment in making sure we have a diversified and competitive artificial intelligence industry. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a stated goal to be a player in that industry. Once again, we're kind of at two opposite ends of the pole here, because if there's one thing about artificial intelligence and data centers, they're powerhouses. So if you want to have a facility like this in your community, what they're going to tell you is you need 400 megawatts, you need 800 megawatts, you need a gig of power just for that facility. The opportunity is presented to the town of Douglas to be considered by major AI players in the Commonwealth through the Massachusetts Office of Business Development are interested in locating here, but they would need power. More power than the grid can supply them. And so the opportunity, or the risk, depending how you look at it, would be that if pine, sand, and gravel is one example, not the only one, but the one that's most salient at the time, at the moment, if you had adequate power there, would you be able to build a data center? What's in it for the taxpayer, and this is a major consideration, is that these buildings have very high value. They are very expensive to build. They are not empty shells on a slab and tilt-up walls and a more or less stable roof. That is not what these things are. They are multi-hundred millions of dollars, if not $1 billion, to build one. And then as far as the tax assessor has been able to ascertain, a lot does depend on the tax structure of the corporation that built it. However, the building is filled with tangible property that can be taxed by a municipality.
Assets.
And those assets may actually be worth significantly more than the building might be. The fascinating thing about them is they are not on a 30-year depreciation table, they're on a 5 or 3-year depreciation table. So the owner of those computer assets is constantly replacing those assets with new ones. And so your new growth trajectory starts to look like this. Warning, don't rely on or become accustomed to spending the revenues generated by the tangible tax. First of all, because it's kind of going like a sine wave. And second of all, because if the center ever closes, you'll never tax that again. All you'll have is the building. So, not that I ever want to throw Hopkinton or Franklin under the bus, but don't spend that money. But it becomes one-time revenues of a really big magnitude for things like capital and roads and other things that the community has said they want. Now, town managers everywhere, our job is to provide you with information about the options in front of you. And you decide. You can set the policy on how far you want us to pursue it, but at the end of the day, the boss are the people that come to town meeting and vote. So municipal light power requires 2 votes at town meeting, and they must each pass by 2/3. So you have to have the consensus of the community that you want to do this, just to form the entity. And then, above and beyond that, you would need the community's consent to determine what are you going to do. You're sticking solar panels in the ground, pulling that Douglas Light Power, or you're building a power plant to support a data center, which would be a really huge investment. Would we do it on our own? Absolutely not. We don't have the money to even begin to approach building a campus of this kind. But a municipal light power can participate in the capital stack and provide funding in a strategic location in the building the funds to build it, to create the project, so that you are in control of it, so that you can set the prices. So the developer's upside of letting the town participate in the project is that now they're dealing with the town on the rates, right? So the town is selling the power to the off-taker at a rate that a municipal light power entity is allowed to charge, as opposed to the grid. There's going to be a delta there. And when you're using many, many, many megawatts of power, that delta is a lot of money. So that's what our research, Bob and Eric is going all out on this thing. But we have had conversations with any number of people who would have to be involved, including the owners of the property, and CRG, who for the longest time up until this week had site control, about what the possibilities were, just to give the board some sense of what it is that we're talking about. My gut tells me I wouldn't really want to do a huge plan, and I would want to play more in the renewables side of this and the substation side of this in order to provide the community with some stability at a time when people are talking about rolling blackouts because we don't generate enough power to power all the appliances we say we want electrified. Having a substation is one way to alleviate the demand of problems that are caused by having too much demand on the wires. So I'm trying to solve a problem for the town, but I don't want to create problems. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to distribute this. I would encourage you to read the first few pages of it, because I think it gives you a good idea who has what are the mechanics of it. And I would say, Mr. Chairman, that if the select board is interested, maybe at your next session, we would invite a town manager or two from towns that have municipal light power, or maybe their plant manager, and have a thoughtful conversation. What does it mean? And how do people feel? I will be sending you an email, and I will be careful about doing this. I don't know if they're a city or a town. I think they're technically still a town. The town of Westfield, Massachusetts, has just entered into a significant data center deal. They have a municipal power plant already. They're going to build a second one. And the community's behind it. it's going to generate an awful lot of activity and revenue for that community. And, listen, the pace of change in Westfield is definitely slow. The pace quickens the further east you move in Massachusetts, it's pretty slow in Westfield. One of the things that a modern imagination would require when it comes to any kind of fossil fuel plant would be cogeneration. So I listened to the gas guy once who was trying to badmouth electricity, and he was giving all kinds of statistics about how much electricity is wasted because it's transmitted over bare wires. So I did my own research, and it was all poppycock. You actually don't lose that much. The power is moving at the speed of light, and it's all kind of holding itself together around the medium, so it's really not bleeding. You lose about 3%.
You'd lose more if it was insulated.
You actually lose.
Yeah.
The really tremendous waste with power plants is that they waste all the heat. The nice thing about data centers, the reason why the campus makes sense, is if you use cogeneration, you can use the thermodynamic change to either you would never heat a data center, you would always be cooling. But you can use the rules of thermodynamics, so generate steam to cool the building. It's a thing, it happens. It's real, it's what a heat pump does. And therefore, you're making a much more efficient use of the fuel. You're not just venting all that heat, letting it escape and only taking it.
Reclaiming it.
So, like I say, there will be places in Massachusetts that successfully pursue this opportunity. It doesn't have to be Douglas, but if you want it to be, there are serious investments of time and energy and eventually funds to make it happen. And MOBD is interested in us because we have a juncture of a highway, a high-pressure natural gas line, and high-tension major transmission assets along 146. And then along 146, you have some pretty high-level fiber. So if you're going to locate a data center, you're looking for all the things you need to build that kind of enterprise: water, power, access to fiber. And so we fit the bill. That doesn't mean we necessarily want it. And I hesitate to say this, but if you want to continue to use economic development as an engine for municipal revenue, data centers don't generate truck traffic. They don't generate shopping traffic. And we wouldn't build a shopping center here anyway, it's too close to Millbury, but the point is, at the traffic levels forecast by CRG, if they were to develop 2.8 million square feet of warehouse space in pine, sand, and gravel, would be an annoyance. It would definitely be very noticeable. Whereas a data center is going to be a couple hundred people. And they're not driving anywhere, driving to work, they're working. They might come out and get lunch, but they're not really going to be leaving for, it's not going to be a lot of traffic. So that's what we're trying to think of, is trying to provide the town with the kind of economic development people say they want, but balancing it against things that people say they don't want. It is ultimately a community choice. But it all starts with how much time are we going to invest in investigating this, and we're looking for your guidance.
The two votes at town meeting, one to establish said municipal light department. What's the second?
They're the same.
Say,
You just have to jump through the hoop twice.
fiscal impact on either of those two votes? Or will we have time to do some homework before we really?
It's always the chicken or egg. How, and it will depend on what you decide, right? So if you were looking for a bigger campus development, and the developing entity said that there's a place at the table for municipal light and power, so why don't you guys please do that? We could go to town meeting with a fairly detailed plan, what's involved in if we're not going to go that route, but we still want to do municipal light and power, because we think we have some opportunities to build a substation to the $8 million, and do that renewable energy play with batteries and all, this is all very affordable and within our, it's kind of within our sweet spot, we can do it. That might be somewhat more speculative, right? When we go to town, why would we flesh that out completely? We're looking for authority to do fairly small things. And maybe we would just flesh it out so that the votes were nice and clean. But it's important to note that you would structure town meetings, the motion for town meeting, based on what it is you want it to do. So, reading the statute carefully, municipal light and power can only do what the taxpayers say they want it to do when they pass the motion at town meeting. It's not a carte blanche authority. So in Westport, I don't know what's happened to this, I'm going to have to look it up. We voted twice in town meeting in the affirmative, more than 2/3, to form municipal light and power, because there's another little power, a little thing that municipal light and power can do. They can become your cable company. So Westport, very poorly served by Charter and Spectrum. And so we have around town, we have a whole bunch of towers that were once built for communication to the ocean that now are ideal locations to build base stations for data and cable. And we voted that, so that we didn't want any of the rest of it. We just wanted basically to get rid of Spectrum. And I can tell you that's one way to win a vote at town meetings. How many people want to get rid of Spectrum? I don't know. That's right. But you just have to remember in the back of your mind, you have to pay for it all. Like, you're going to buy that asset and then run it as your own company. And you make sure you understand the economics. I think one reason why we haven't, I don't think it's actually been developed yet in Westport, is because it actually became more expensive than people think. I'll look into it. I thought that'd be a good preliminary conversation. That's what we're talking about. We're spending more and more time pursuing this because the landowners at Pine Sand and Gravel are genuinely interested in going this way. By the way, you may end up with a data center proposal even if the town has no road.
No what?
No road. Right? They might just want to do it and come through the permitting process on their own without us. I'm identifying places where we can sit at the table and get something for the town out of it.
Yeah, besides the tax revenue for the
Besides the
building.
tax revenue.
Yeah.
Well, we become a lot, excuse me,
And it's
a
benefit.
lot more attractive when you're able to set your rates that are considerably less than
More
what
beneficial.
the grid is charging. I think it's pretty forward-thinking. It's still daunting as hell to me, but
Even if you establish it and put it on for the first town meeting in May, you're just establishing the entity as part of your investigation.
It's kind of like the withdrawal from MSHG. You approve, the first one's always easy. The first one pretty much always passes.
Yep.
It's getting to the second, because then the second one, the rubber hits the road. What are you buying? What are you going to do with it?
what's it
What's
cost?
it going to cost,
Yeah,
right?
but yeah, you know what I mean, so it's not a bad thing.
So the statute has a time limitation. The two votes have to occur within reasonable proximity. So you can't vote
Okay.
in 2024 and then vote again in 2027.
Okay.
It's serious.
Good enough.
So yes, I think it's my thought. Yeah.
Yeah, push on with it, I guess, and see the options, see what's benefits.
Yeah, you can investigate the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
if it doesn't,
Yeah,
pass the test,
right.
you know what I mean, or, I mean, but there's a benefit, I think, with
Well,
Tennessee
from what
Pipeline.
the administrator's saying, he's not suggesting that we have 3 Mile Island,
No.
Right.
Oh, not by any chance.
right? So it's going in that direction and exploring what the options actually are, so that we make a good
Like I
decision.
said, even as simple as a substation, which, could be of some sort of benefit.
To the community.
I think it's only viable to kind of pry into it a little bit and
Our
see.
responsibility is not to even support it at this point, because we don't even know what it is yet.
Right. Agree. Investigate a little more.
If we're gonna run much longer, we gotta take that little infamous 2-hour vote.
Yeah, I think, you want to do that, go ahead.
You only got 2 things left on there, so.
Do you need to vote on number 9?
No, there's,
No,
yeah.
discussion.
It just,
So I think we can get through,
So what I'm taking from the group, though, is that we will continue to flesh out what the options are. It's not a waste of time.
no.
Continue to do that.
at this point, sure.
We'll try to refine it more carefully into what the site can support, and what the other options are. So in terms of, like I said, be renewable conscious, storage conscious. And start, I think what we can, I feel confident we can do is start to talk to the industry about what certain things cost, and what the potential benefits are. It's one thing to say you want to play in the market, it's another to say, how much money are you actually going to make?
You
Play the
got
arbitrage.
Westfield jumping in to build another one now, so you're gonna have some really good data to mess around with.
So Westfield's about 5 steps ahead of us, so
Right.
we are going to go out there and talk to them, or have them come here, whatever we're going to do. Get a better sense of what they're actually.
Good. All right, number 10, are we ready? This is just to review and edit the evaluation instrument that we sent out to the board shortly after our last meeting. I don't know if I actually did get one back already. But was there any adjustments to that document that this board wants before we?
I think we need to adjust it, but I don't think we should do it now, because we don't have any time for it, right? So there's a few things in there that don't apply, that are in there. So what I did on mine is I took, because each thing has like 5 or 6 bullet points, so then I scored each bullet point, and then I did my average. Well, then there were some bullet points that I found that they just didn't apply. Town manager stuff, we don't have that charter, so it just doesn't apply. The 5-year capital plan, developing a 5-year capital plan, actually the capital committee does that, so that doesn't apply. So there's certain things in there that we could tweak a little bit and take out, but I think, unless anybody disagrees, I think as a whole, we could probably get through this process with the document that we have. I actually already did mine, I just have to do my little commentary and give it to you. And I didn't know what the process was gonna be this year, because normally you give it to Lisa, and then Lisa gives it to the chairman. It doesn't really matter, I don't know how
Yeah,
you
you can
wanna
just send it
receive
to
them,
me.
if you want them hard copied, emailed, or how you want them.
No, yeah, email's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I got mine complete. I just haven't, I got to do once more review through and press send.
So you already handed yours in? Al did his already?
Hal did his already.
Holy
So you guys are good. You cleared your homework before the holiday. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we're fine with it as it is for this year.
Yeah.
It has,
But after we go through the process, we should, everybody's input to see what we could clean up on there, take off some of those items that don't apply to them. And add anything if we see fit.
good. Matt, you've spoken a lot. Is there anything else you want to pass on to us?
I don't even begin to think of saying another word.
He's without a word.
So for executive session, there are, in abundance of caution, I put 2 things here under potential litigation. I think you can strike MSHD.
Excuse me.
I don't want to have that conversation with you in executive session without counsel. Rich and I are going back and forth with some ideas, and I really just want to focus on the second topic.
Bless you.
I want to take 5 to 10 minutes, and that's potential litigation with Arthur J. Gallagher.
All right.
You're up.
Doesn't have to be you. We can put Les on the spot.
I'll make a motion to
No, I think he enjoys doing it because he kind of tweaks it a little bit.
You're gonna catch me off guard now. So I'll make a motion to enter executive session for potential litigation of Arthur J. Gallagher and Company, votes possible, and to reconvene into open session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Lovely.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Les, roll call vote.
Smith, aye?
Stevens, aye.
Fitzpatrick, aye.
Bone and I.